Hello, my name is Vincent. I'm a producer here at Black Label Music, and today we're talking to Spencer from a few different projects
How's
that
it
we're
going?
about to mention. You want to say hi to the camera real quick?
What's happening, everybody?
That's what's up. Okay, so do you want to just tell us a little bit about yourself, like where you're from and how music kind of came into your life?
Yeah, so I was born in Eau Claire, Wisconsin, but I grew up in Minneapolis.
Yeah,
I started getting into music in terms of playing it from kind of copying my older sister.
yeah.
At one point, she had like gotten a guitar for Christmas, and I just wanted to be like her. So I was like, oh, I want to start playing guitar.
Hey, okay.
She put me onto a lot of music. I think like I I didn't really have any like musicians in my life growing up, but
Yeah,
there's like a lot of people who were super into music. So I had like my older cousin Max, he put me onto a bunch of stuff. My sister, I would just like constantly steal like her CDs and then like burn them like to my own little mixes, and then like while while
Tight.
she wasn't like looking, go in her room and just like steal her
That's funny as
CDs, which
hell.
is like messed up, but
Yeah.
but I'm glad that like
Yeah.
yeah. And then yeah, my dad and my mom, like it was such like a kind of like diverse set of things. Like I had folk music and like rock music for my dad. My dad also put me on to Tupac. Like, he kind of
Oh, really?
he had like a
You
big
got that
Tupac
folk music
phase.
and then the Tupac.
Yeah, and then my mom would listen to like rancheras and
Yeah,
stuff like
yeah.
that. So
Tight.
like I would be put on to like Vicente Fernandez and
Hey, okay. Yeah.
like yeah, and then my older sister listened to like like The Used and like a bunch of rap music, and my cousin would like put me on to like Lil Wayne and like Lloyd Banks and stuff like
Yeah.
that. And yeah, so I just started like I think wanting to emulate all those things that I was being like put onto.
Yeah.
So I started learning guitar after my sister got one, and then just played it as like a hobby.
Mm-hmm.
And then in middle school is when I met Nazim,
Okay.
and we would just kind of like freestyle in science class as a
Nice.
joke. It would be a lot of like stupid like joke stuff. He already had like a very apparent bubbling talent,
Yeah.
but me and him would just like mess around. And then in high school I started like singing more.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't really sing at all until high school,
Yeah.
and it was just something that I started enjoying, and like making like covers and stuff like that. And then Nazim and I would also like do more serious kind of like freestyle ciphers that we would host,
Yeah.
like under the stairwell
Tight.
during,
Under the
during
stairwell
lunch.
is
Yeah,
crazy.
no, it was very cool. It was like
Yeah.
like a origin story for sure.
Yeah.
But yeah, so there'd just be like a rotating cast of characters. Francis was one of the people
Hey,
that would be
Francis.
in there too. Yeah, and
Man.
then our homie Mercy, and yeah, so we started doing that, and then we did a couple talent shows, and I went off to college in Milwaukee
Yeah.
for a very short stint that didn't last long.
Okay.
I've always been a really terrible student.
What
And
were you going for?
film.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So that's also another thing
so that's
that
kind
I
of how.
do on the side.
Yeah, I'm gonna get into that at some point too.
Yeah. Yeah. There's too much going on.
Man,
Yeah. But I went off, and then Nazim had been making like some he had this record he put out in EP in high school called The Coliseum,
yeah.
and like some really dope songs on it. Like he just like he he was naturally gifted. I also don't want to. I hate like sometimes saying like when someone's like gifted and they're just natural, because like
Yeah.
I'm sure as like an artist, like
Yeah.
there's so much work that like goes behind it,
Yeah, it's
and like a
valid.
lot of practice and stuff. But like I think he had that like combination of just like
That intuition.
yeah,
Yeah.
and also the practice that you put into it.
That
So it's
makes
dope.
sense.
And then I was like in college, like in my dorm room, I started making like beats and stuff. And
Do you feel like you had like kind of like a natural like intuition for music, or did you really have to like start like just fumbling and then kind of
Yeah.
develop it?
Yeah, a lot of failure, a lot of fumbling. I've always been kind of like a clumsy person. I just would
That's
like
funny.
repeatedly like stumble
That's
into
funny.
things until like until like it worked out.
Yeah.
But that's I think for me I had like a really chaotic like childhood,
Yeah.
and like I could kind of retreat to like music and like video games and stuff. Like
Yeah.
there's like an arsenal of things to kind of deal with like anything that was like really stressful or overwhelming going on. So that's kind of like, it was like a mix of like that fascination with like art in general and like just all the things that I had like grown up around.
Yeah.
And then it's kind of like a refuge from like, you know, some traumas that you could like, you know, endure through a chaotic childhood. You know what I'm saying?
You know, as I've been doing these like interviews and stuff, that's kind of been a common theme. Is like people that are really that like are doing music on any professional level. Like there's like sort of this like space in their childhood that they needed music to fill to like get over something. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
And also like I feel like it kind of like makes you really appreciate music as more than just like, oh, you're listening to some music. Like it's like really like ingrained in your body when you like start as a child, especially when you like when it's like sort of this coping thing. You know what I mean? I think I think it kind of takes like sort of having a relationship like that on some level to like really dig in. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
So
yeah, and I think that's what's like really important about like music to the youth is like the process of growing up is really confusing, and like there's so much stuff that like you don't know. So like having that kind of like lifeline towards some like cohesion or like explanation to things that is going on is like essential.
Absolutely, man. So right now you got multiple projects. You have your fashion with the prototype. Then Blood Smoke Body. With Nazim, right? And is that just you and Nazim?
It's me and Nazim in terms of like the just like band itself, or just like the music writers, and then we kind of see it as like a team of people too, and like a movement,
like
a collective, exactly. So we have there's Josh Johnson is a saxophone player.
And I saw him playing on a couple videos.
He accompanies us a lot live, and also like we're getting him on some more songs too. And our friend Marcus Sherman is a guy we've been collaborating a lot with, and he's out in Queens, New York, and he is a part of our like management company too, like High Water Music, run by the homie Seuss, that's also out in Ridgewood, Queens.
Cool.
And I met him through one of my exes who she's super cool, but like she was like, you and Marcus should meet, and I was like, cool. So shout out to
me and Ibe met Marcus because Marcus was he was recording Nazim's vocals for that project. We had like
cool.
We had like a whole Zoom setup where like he was feeding the Ableton session through the Zoom so we could hear it while he was like, it was kind of cool. Yeah, he's really good. So Blood Smoke Body. So do you guys play a lot of shows?
We used to. Yeah, we used to play a ton of shows. Like when we were starting out, I remember, and like house shows were way more of a thing. This was like between like 2014 and 2017. We were probably playing like a show a week, you know? And then, you know, there's COVID, and now Nazim living in New York, and here we don't play as many shows, but that's kind of nice, honestly. Like, you know, like, and I would love to like play more shows, but I think there's also kind of like an evolution kind of happening in, I would say, a way that's like akin to like a, you know, a caterpillar blossoming into a butterfly, that little
Yeah.
between like cocoon
Yeah,
stage, you know
yeah.
what I'm saying? Like just figuring out how like the dynamic can evolve, because it used to be you know, just more us like rapping with the two tracks and the DJ,
Yeah.
which is cool. But I think that like we have done that so much, and now I think like um with like audiences, there's more that desire for like the full band
Yeah.
and stuff. So like
Dude,
trying to
that'd be
figure out
tight.
how we can like incorporate that.
Dude, Blood Smoke Body with a full band would be fucking insane.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and we've
Yeah.
done it before, and it's like
Yeah.
pretty sick, but it's also
Hey.
like it's hard to orchestrate.
Yeah,
So like
totally.
definitely like, you know, working out the kinks with that. But yeah.
Totally. Okay, well, that's cool. So since Nazim moved to New York,
Hmm.
was that sort of like when you started City Sanflora like this? And also just I don't know. Also just first of all describe like what that project is.
Uh-huh.
Because I've seen like I saw you on the Spotify.
Hmm.
I checked out some of the music and stuff. And also that's like your Instagram handle as well.
Hmm.
So like what is that project? Is that like a personal project for you or
Yeah, yeah, definitely. I think there's just some stuff that like feels not as like cohesive with like the the band,
mm-hmm.
and more personal stuff. I think it's like there's like certain things, stories, emotions like that I explore with like my solo project that's just feels like super personal and like
Yeah.
kind of um yeah, like sometimes I'm like there's also just this aspect of like, oh yeah, like the blood smoke body stuff can sound like really cool sometime, and then I just have this like super like emo like
Yeah,
side to
yeah, I
things.
know what
I'm
you
just like,
mean.
you know, I feel like that's got to be contained to itself so it doesn't like change like
Yeah,
everything else. But and it's also just like there's stuff that's just like different genre,
yeah,
so like singer songwriter, like folk music, you
yeah,
know,
yeah.
like
I remember you were mentioning that you were kind of working on some folksy music before. So is was that sort of inspired by your dad's like folk music, like growing up, or was that how did folk music enter your life, or is it just like a product of being in the Twin Cities? Like, what? How did that come into your life?
I think it was just going down like rabbit holes of like finding music that I had already known and wanting to like explore more of those sounds and
Yeah,
finding related artists and stuff like that. Like I
yeah,
remember like the MTV Unplugged Nirvana
yeah,
like was probably like my entry point into more like, you know, like singer songwriter stuff, and my dad and I used to listen to that record a lot, and also like Bon Iver.
yeah,
I think there were like those were like entry points. Cat Stevens, you
yeah,
know, and then I'd like check out other stuff. Cat Power, I was like my sister put me on to. I really
okay,
loved her. I think Cat Power was like really influential on me in terms of kind of just having like stripped back, like kind of dark and like raspy like tone. And same
yeah,
thing with like Chavela Vargas. Like if you're familiar with her stuff at all, it's like very like just like stripped back and like raw and like emotional and
yeah.
like raspy.
That makes sense.
And I kind of was just like looking for similar things to that.
Yeah,
Yeah. And I just like I had like, you know, I'm also into like indie pop and stuff like that. And it's just kind of funny. There was like a little experimental. We did an album called Lovesick Animal Online, which I feel like was like kind of like a mending of the two worlds of like the more like singer songwriter stuff and like hip hop
yeah,
and like indie shit and or
yeah. That
indie
makes
stuff.
sense.
And then like it came together pretty cool. But I used to be like a Slicky Ricardo. That was like my like
Yeah,
first like solo thing, and I'm just kind of shifting it more into something that I feel like is like more raw and like myself.
yeah. That makes sense.
Yeah.
So like, so okay. So would you say that you like started with hip hop and you're kind of like branching out to different things? Is that
Yeah.
sort of the vibe?
Mm-hmm.
So like in that process, have you seen anything that's like difficult to like that's made it difficult to like kind of like make the switch, or any like hurdles you've had like switching from being creative in a hip hop way to like being creative in folksy or like indie type of ways?
Um, I think they kind of operate in like different hemispheres of the brain in terms of like,
Yeah,
but also there's a lot of things that are similar too. Because
yeah,
I think about like um rap is like storytelling, you know,
yeah,
and I feel like that has honestly helped a lot with like my like singer songwriter like writing because I think when I'm like writing raps and like for me, I still have like I feel like a lot to learn when it comes to like writing raps, but it kind of um, worked a muscle in my brain
hmm,
where I'm thinking about like certain lines and just thinking about how I can like embellish them to make them more unique
yeah,
and say it's like the whole like show don't tell
yeah,
kind of mentality.
hmm,
And I feel like hip hop for me was elicited that writing process out of me more than when I initially sat down to write like folk songs and stuff where I might just like I say things a little too plainly.
hmm,
And so I think that aspect of it made it really simple. Um and sometimes like I like there's like rap with a melody, so I can't
yeah,
necessarily just say like, oh, well, then one has a melody and one doesn't, because like
yeah,
sometimes the rap has that. So I don't know. I think for me like it just feels like different modes of like a similar thing, you know,
yeah. That
just
makes sense.
songwriting. Ultimately, I try to just be vulnerable and talk about my feelings more. I think when I like earlier on is just kind of about like emulating like things I was like into.
Hmm,
And for me, my music process, like getting older and trying to get better, has been more just like trying to be radically honest,
yeah.
which can be like hard sometimes, especially if you're trying to make like cool songs or like
Yeah.
hit songs. Sometimes it's just like, damn,
So
like
like being radically honest, like in your lyricism, or like radically honest with your creativity and like the sounds that you use and the direction you go in with the music.
I'd say lyricism, because
Yeah.
I think in terms of like the sonic landscape, it's like a playground, you know, and like
Hmm.
you can really like mess around and with like whatever is just like enticing
Yeah.
and combine things, take things away. But yeah, I guess with the songwriting, because like sometimes it's like for me, I've felt like the pressure to be cool or to sound cool when in reality like and I don't mean this in like a self-deprecating way, but I'm like a really uncool person.
Goofy as
I'm such like a dork, you know, like, and
hell.
like there's really I did hardly have a cool bone in my body,
Yeah.
but like um that kind of holds space for something cool. I shouldn't use the term cool, but something like
Yeah, I know what you
special
mean.
to happen, you know?
Totally, yeah.
And I think like any moment I can like tap into like something like really authentic and like genuine um is when I tend to be the most satisfied in the
Yeah.
process of creation. But it takes a lot to like um try to approach the process or creation in a way that's like not the indoctrinated by like
Yeah.
either like society or culture's like expectations of like what like good or successful is supposed to be,
Yeah.
and also just like your own interests, because
Yeah.
sometimes it's like, oh damn, like I might just be regurgitating like something that I really like but is
Yeah.
also like not necessarily like me specifically, you
Yeah,
know.
that's valid. Have you ever like put out a song and you're like, damn, that was way too vulnerable, and then you're like,
Yeah.
damn,
Yeah.
like now
Yeah.
everybody knows this, like it's crazy.
Definitely. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, for sure. And I have like when I've done some solo performances, there's still like a decent amount of stuff that like I haven't really like put out, but like I've played live and I'll just like get done with the song and just be like, oh God, I can't believe I like just like said all of
No,
that
I
to
get
all
it,
these
man.
people.
I get it. No, I get that. Yeah, I've
But
definitely like played a bunch of shows. Like I mean, this is not an interview for me. This is an interview for
no,
Spencer.
please,
But
I'd like to know.
but yeah, like I remember when we first started playing with the band and stuff. It was like we had a lot of songs that I was like trying to write in a certain vibe, or
Hmm.
like kind of be goofy, or trying to like say some like out of pocket sort of things, just to, like rile up some attention. You know
Yeah.
what I mean?
Yeah, for sure.
And then, like, man, I remember getting off stage and being like, I'm so embarrassed about what I just did up on stage, and I'll have to face these people in the audience.
Yeah.
And yeah, I did like a full switch. I was like, no more, no more. Cut all those songs, wrote a bunch
Yeah.
of new songs. Yeah, but that's an interesting, man, because I feel like a lot of singers are just like, you know, like you create by yourself a lot of time, especially like, or it's a very personal process. And then all of a sudden, and you can post it online, you can post it on Spotify, and you never see the people or the
Hmm.
reactions when they're listening to it. But then you like play it live, and you're like, damn, I'm saying vulnerable things I would not say to people like that
Hmm.
I don't know. You know what I mean? But all of a sudden
Hmm.
you're doing it on stage in front of like however many people. But that being said, like that type of vulnerability is very important, and I feel like it does like connect to people
Yeah.
more. So
Do you feel like you're like when you have that kind of distinction brought forward to you by like taking a song that you've written in solitude and then like performing it to the public and kind of like experiencing that like, oh, okay, this is different, like telling it to everybody, does that change the song for you, or is it just kind of the matter of like the performance is an uncomfortable thing but your relationship with like the piece is still relatively the same?
man, I think there's like three ways, like three different like aspects of this. But I mean, okay, so when I perform a vulnerable song, and then I
Uh-huh.
perform it a bunch of times, it's like I basically desensitize myself from playing it live. So it's
For
just like it
sure.
feels normal.
Yeah.
Um, um, Also, when I'm performing like a really emotional song live, um, I feel like I can lock into it way better because there's something to draw from for like the when I'm like singing or something. Like I can really lock in, put like soul exactly where it needs to be,
Hmm.
like throughout the course of the song. Like the highs feel higher, like the lows feel lower. You know what I mean? But also, there's this aspect of like people are like, does he know what he's saying? Like, has he been through these things? There's like this
Yeah.
sort of like aspect of disbelief when I'm bringing up something that's like very personal and deep, that is like maybe an experience that a lot of people don't have. It's
Hmm.
like, damn, why is he? So I feel like then there's like this disconnect from certain audiences. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
I don't know. I don't know if that answered your question.
Yeah.
It's funny.
No, definitely.
Nobody's asked me a question on the interview series yet. This is kind of
Sorry.
cool. No, it's okay, yo.
Yeah, yeah. No, yeah.
No,
It's
no.
very interesting.
Yeah.
What you were saying just made me think of like the relationship between like artists and their songs and how um the act of making it public kind of I think has the potential to alter like the relationship with the thing that you made, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I think like a lot of artists like have very personal things that are maybe not always like good things that they talk about in their songs. Like maybe they're being toxic in a relationship or
Yeah.
something.
Hmm.
They put that out and everybody's like, oh, they put that out. It's like public now. Everybody's listening to that. Like that's a toxic thing.
Hmm.
And then it kind of gets normalized.
Yeah.
And then it's like, but that wasn't a normal thing. That was one person who did that.
Hmm.
And those like behaviors or whatever, they happen to one person. That's their journey. That does not mean that that is like a normal thing just because a billion people listen to that song. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah. Pop
So
culture and music can kind of like be like a megaphone for certain ideas to like
Yeah.
become falsely like monolithic, you know,
Yeah.
like
Yeah, dude.
which is an interesting phenomena, you
Yeah,
know.
totally.
That I think that's like very kind of uh in line with like social media and how it's just kind of like I don't know, but you know, it's kind of like an unintentional and intentional like psyop in some way, like
Yeah.
where like you know some people are scrolling through their feed and see kind of like the same things being said on like podcasts. You know,
Yeah.
one person says it, then another people start like talking about it, and then people are like, oh yeah, this is how like this specific group of people are. This is
Yeah.
how relationships are supposed to be,
Yeah.
or this
No.
is how like the industry is
Yeah,
specifically
dude.
supposed to be. When everything I think is so much more nuanced.
I know. Yeah, it really is, yo. So I think it's important to like, I don't know, be careful with like the power that like we have as creators,
Mm-hmm.
and just be like intentional with it. You know what I mean? Just
Yeah.
intention is important. But I don't know. I mean, there's definitely exceptions to that rule, because sometimes like you just want to put out a banger that's like a little bit raunchy,
Yeah, for
and it's just
sure.
like, oh, let's let it be a banger that's raunchy. Why not? You know what I
Mm-hmm.
mean?
Yeah.
But
Yeah. It's people are very multi-dimensional, and with art, I think that you can speak to numerous different like truths
yeah,
about life, and kind of translate whatever your own experience is to the viewer, the audience, or whatever. But it doesn't. I don't think that has to like you know define you as like a
yeah.
whole.
Yeah, and then it also like takes like some personal accountability on behalf of the listener too, to like really determine what is like being said, because they're trying to preach that that's what you should do, and like what's just being like an artist being vulnerable in a moment, or like what's just for partying. You know what
Yeah,
I
or
mean?
like playing a character, you know.
Yeah,
Then you have like
yeah,
certain
totally.
artists where they're like writing like songs from like unreliable like narrator point of
Yeah,
views, or
yeah,
like
yeah,
you know playing a character of like somebody else, you know.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. But anyway, next question. Let's see what we got.
Sorry, I think I initiated a long tangent
No,
there.
this is good. Long tangents are good.
Okay, cool.
Um, okay, so oh yeah, yeah, I want to talk about cinematography and directing and
Mm-hmm.
stuff.
Yeah.
So your projects are mostly music, like rapping, singing, like producing,
Mm-hmm.
that type of deal. But you also are doing cinematography and
Mm-hmm.
directing, and you also had a brief stint in school
Mm-hmm.
for film.
Mm-hmm.
So how did you get into cinematography and directing, and how does it like taking like what space does it fill in your like creative professional life as a in your spaces right now?
Yeah, so I've just always been a fan of film. I've always had a thing for escapism. So I think that like film was a vehicle for that, one of the earlier ones, probably before like music was for me in a way.
Mm,
Um And yeah, my parents just kind of let me watch whatever, you know.
yeah.
As like I think that might sound like if they were to hear that, they would feel really bad about that. But I think it was actually like really important. There's like,
Yeah.
you know, like horror movies I was watching when I was younger, and then there's also like art house movies that like I was watching when I was younger. I think like I'm trying to think of. I used to love Lord of the Rings and like animated movies. I was a big fan of, but then there were like other like indie movies like Whale Rider. I don't know if
Yeah.
you ever saw that, but I was a big fan
No,
of
I
that.
did see Whale Rider.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
Um, and I think for me, like there was the entertainment in it, but I really appreciated like the wisdom of like character's journey in film,
Yeah.
and I think that I was starved of wisdom in regards to life and cut off from spirituality, because as a young age I like somehow just like had just had this like instinct for being really uncomfortable with like the institution of like religion.
Yeah.
You know, like my mom's like Mexican and like super Catholic,
Yeah.
so there was like a lot of like being forced to like go to church, and it all just like made me really uncomfortable. And I think for me, like art kind of became like the religion for me, and like film, there are a lot of things that like I saw that I really like appreciated. Like people just like like the capacity to change, I think, is like
Yeah.
one of the like big things for me. But like that, you know, that's a like long tangent. Basically, being saying that like film was like super just important to me, and then I like got to this point where I was just like making like stop motion animation like videos
Yeah.
and stuff
Okay.
like that.
Yeah.
And so that I think that just like doing that for fun started to build like a literacy in filmmaking.
Yeah.
And then it got to a point where like in school I was doing a lot of like anytime there was like a video project, I was like, all right, you know what, I'm terrible in school, but I'm gonna go crazy with this, you know. I'm like about to go in,
Yeah.
you know. And like I made a few cool little short films with my friends in high school. And then, you know, Nazim and I were like homeless for a while, and like while we were like starting the music career, and like I had like a camera that like my either my mom or my dad gave me one of their old cameras.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, we didn't have the money to pay a videographer,
Yeah.
you know. And because we had barely enough money to like feed ourselves and pay for like the alcohol that we required, you know. And so just did our own videos, and it was kind of a combination of like me, Nazim, and our homie Lee Bonds like concepts, and then like
Yeah.
I would just apply like all of the things I'd learned from just like making little short films and just being interested in like the making of films, because I'd always like watched like the DVD extras and stuff about like I was just always fascinated with like the creation of films besides just like the movies themselves. So I guess that's where it came from. And then now, I mean, the place that film occupies in my life right now is for work. I mean, it's kind of like unfortunate, but I'm sure, you know, as like an artist, like in a capitalist society, it's really hard to sustain off of a single thing.
Yeah.
And, you know, I've had my struggles with like this mental illness and like anxiety and stuff like that. And it's, I've, you know, it's hard for me to hold down a regular job. So like for me, my solution was to just like play at my strengths and just like, you know, I have kind of a propensity to like just do a bunch of different things.
Yeah.
And have like a bunch of different interests. So I'm like, oh, okay, I'll just like, you know, a lot of things I'm interested in don't make that much money.
Yeah.
But I'm gonna try and just do all of them.
Yeah.
And be very passionate about all of them. And so I also do like corporate videography and like do work on like commercial filmmaking every once in a while. It's like, you know, like a grip or something in the lighting department.
That's
you know,
tight.
like, and yeah.
Cool. Yeah. Okay. So let me look at this. Okay. How did you get good at producing? That was just a question. How did you get good? How did you get good at producing?
I'm glad that you think I'm good at producing.
Yeah, I looked at all your
that.
reels earlier today. I was like, "What the heck?" I was like,
you.
"These are fire."
Thank you.
Yeah.
I remember this is kind of sad, but
Okay.
you know, my sister was my younger sister had brain cancer, and before she passed away, she gave me this like beat machine.
Yeah.
And like when she died, that became like my method of like grieving, was to just like sample stuff. And I was just like sampling a bunch of things. And I think it just kind of like became a new fascination for me. Cause I mean, I was always into hip hop, but like I didn't really like make beats seriously until that point. And I think there's like this mixture of like, okay, like being a fan of hip hop, and I was like rapping, it felt really cool to be able to like experience like the process from the other end.
Mm-hmm.
And it also felt like this like kind of spiritual thing too, where I could, I don't know, stay like connected to my sister in a certain way. And she was like opposite of me in the sense where I'm super shy. Like I'm an extremely shy, kind of awkward person. And like, you know, I even think about like getting successful or being in the limelight. That scares me, you know. But she was like always dancing and singing and like throwing little like shows and having everybody like come watch her like sing some new routine and stuff like that. So I think that in a way, like anytime that I do those things, like perform and stuff, which I don't think are like, they don't like align as well with like my personality, I think. And for me, it's kind of like keeping her legacy going. And I think just all that time that I spent making beats as like a way to deal with that situation, I just fell in love with it and did it a bunch. And yeah, I mean, I'm just a big fan of like the musicality of like production as well. I can't say I'm a very like musically like intellectual person. I'm trying to work on more like theory and stuff, but I think like the concept of groove and just like, you know, harmony and like rhythm from a feeling standpoint felt natural to me. Yeah.
That makes sense.
So I think that that's kind of like, you know, different angles of that production side of things. So it's kind of like what created like a passion to do it repeatedly and like with the discipline to like, you know, put in a lot of reps essentially.
Totally. Okay. So do you have any like projects or anything coming up that like any releases, any shows type of deal?
Shows, I have none to speak of, sadly. But if anybody, you know, wants somebody to sing sad songs to open up their show and they're watching this podcast right now, shoot me a DM. But I have 2 projects I'm working on simultaneously under the City Sanflora moniker, and one is like just more like stripped down like folk music, and the other is kind of more experimental, like mixing like indie pop and like R&B and stuff. And then Nazim and I don't really know like what I can talk about in specifics, but we got some like cool things. Like I think next, like the end of this year and next year is going to be like really cool for Blood Silk Bodies. A lot of cool things happening under the hood. But he and I have a project where I just did all the production and he did all the rapping, called The Thug Named Natural Causes. It was supposed to come out at the end of May. I have to check in to see if that's still like okay due to some like cool changes going on. But that's one thing to expect. And then we have like 2 projects produced by our homie Marcus, who goes by Sherman.
Yeah.
He's such a cool producer and just like such a cool guy. I gotta like shout him out. Just everybody like who's like been on our team, you know, is like, I feel so blessed and grateful to kind of just serendipitously like come together, you know, totally, to make this thing. And it's weird. Nazim and I have been making music for like 10 plus years now, and everybody's always been saying like, oh, like, you guys are gonna blow up, you guys are gonna blow up. They said that like the first year or two, and it's just like, damn, it's been like 10 years, this is not happening, you know. But like it's starting to, like, everything's starting to come together, and which is cool, you know. And I think if I'm gonna just give any unsolicited advice to any artists out there, is to just keep going and keep finding like what is true to you, because like it's so strange. Like there's like stuff that's happened recently that like we've been like hoping to happen come at a point where it's like, damn, like it might be time to just like hang up the coat. You know what I'm saying? Like we've been doing it for a long time, nothing like, you know, not really seeing like evident fruits of the labor, but you know, but yeah, we got so many songs and like a couple albums like under the hood right now. It's I'm psyched to see.
That's amazing
how it'll turn out.
Cool. Cool. Well, that's all I have for interview questions.
Bet.
Yeah, you can say goodbye to the camera real quick if you like.
All right, take it easy, everybody. It's City Sanflora, and it's been a pleasure.
Yeah. Thank you for listening, you guys. This has been the Black Label Show. Once again, this is Spencer. I'm gonna have all your handles and everything at the end of the video, so we can find you.
Appreciate it.
Thank you for doing this.
Thank you, Vinny. Appreciate it.
Two stepping at the function, get it shaped up. Styling got them VVs on my neck, feeling A1.